Well, I think we're going to begin. Laurel said she wasn't able to come. She actually has to work this morning. But we will. So I'm not sure if this is our last Rebbe Nachman. So maybe this means this is the last Rebbe Nachman.
We know it's not gonna be the last.
It might actually be the last, but in some ways, the stories of Rebbe Nachman are bring together all of his teachings and bring together everything we've been talking about from the very beginning. Because in his stories, he really teaches everything else, his whole life path, his whole way of presenting the path to Judaism, to God, to spirituality. And what Rebbe Nachman was known for were long stories. And so he'd tell, like this one, right? This is a long story. And it wasn't like he was, telling them to group. He said, and now I'm going to tell you a long story. The way this story, many of his other stories came out is actually in the middle of a teaching. Like he was teaching Torah. And so in one of his collections of Torah studies, suddenly he's teaching Torah, and then he starts to tell a story in the middle of it to illustrate his point. And 17 pages later, to his followers, his stories aren't malleable, and so they're all in the sense that he said them in a certain way. And every translation I could find of the story that he said is almost word for word the way you would translate the Torah, almost. And so I tried to find an abbreviated version, and I could not. And I tried to abbreviate it myself, and I spent a long time on it, and then gave up because it was hard to do so. And I think we'll get through 2/3 of it, maybe, if we're lucky, and then that'll be fine. The last third doesn't need as much attention to it. But this is the way he did his stories, and there's some beautiful collections of his stories that one can find published by Jewish Light and other important publishers. And they're very deep, and people have analyzed the story psychologically and spiritually in all kinds of ways. And he also has shorter stories, and I mentioned one of them a few weeks ago, but I was going to quickly mention it before we go here too, because I think it also illustrates some of what we've been talking about in regard his way of thinking and being and teaching. And it's a story of a Turkey of a prince, a prince of a great king who one day kind of lost his mind and took off all his clothes and went under the table and said, "I'm a turkey." And just said, "I'm a turkey, I'm a turkey." And nobody could get it from out under the table. I said, "I'm a turkey, I'm a turkey, I'm a turkey." And so finally the king didn't know what to do, and he found one sage who said, "I have an idea." And so what did the sage do? He also took off all of his clothes and went underneath the table and said, "I'm also a turkey." And so he spent all this time with the sun underneath, and they'd make turkey sounds. And at a certain point, he said, "Well, I'm a turkey too, and turkeys can put on clothes." And so the son started to put on clothes with him, and then they went through all the clothes and he said, "Well, we're both turkeys, and we can both come and sit around the table, can't we?" And so, okay. And so that's how he got him out from underneath the table. But it was used as the Hasidic ideal for how people are raised. Oh, thank you. How to raise people from the depths. This is the Hasidic ideal. People are going through a terrible situation. Is you go to where they are and you really feel where they are. Even more than what we call empathy. Just really tying yourself to where they are, and then you go up from that place. And so that was a beautiful story, right? And if you look at it from that angle, so all of his stories have illustrate Hasidic ideals and specifically his ideals, and they're all kind of complicated, and we have to read them a little bit in their context of Eastern Europe a few hundred years ago and a very traditional society. But the way I imagine we should read this is not just read. We can talk as we go through it, and try and see where it's going. If you haven't, have any of you read it ahead of time? No, you read it.
Yes,
Okay.
I read it.
Okay. And one of the reasons I brought it because of our discussion over the last few weeks about joy, And maybe to give you a little bit of background, the tale of the Sophisticate and the Simpleton. Rebbe Nachman really believed in the power of simplicity in the same way as he believed in the power of joy. But that's where there's something very powerful there. And in the four sons of the Passover Seder, Rebbe Nachman has a whole teaching how, in fact, the holiest is the simple one, and the worst one is the wise one because he thinks he's wise, while really the evil one is not so bad because the evil one at least knows where he is. And so he gives it a little looking at our own egos and looking at our own kind of ways of. So he has a whole teaching, and that's actually the provenance of this story is from that teaching, and it's from one of his collections of teachings. Actually, you can find the story in it. And so this version is from Breslov.org, but Wikisource has a version 2 of it, and you can find other sources, and some have been translated and published. And this is one of his, in his collections of 10-20 stories. It's always in there. Let's just begin. Alan.
Okay. And I'm assuming for everybody who might want to look this up, it's Breslov.org, not.
Sorry.
Okay. No, I just, everybody fill that in.
Yeah.
Once there were two householders in one city who were very wealthy. They had large houses, and each one of them had a son, both of whom studied in the same classroom. Now, one of these sons was bright, and the other was simple-minded. He was not foolish, only his intellect was simple and of a low level. These two sons loved each other very much. In spite of their great difference in intellect, they loved each other very much. As time passed, the two householders began to lose their wealth. They sank further and further until they became destitute and were left with nothing except their houses. The sons began to grow up. So the fathers said to their sons, "We do not have the ability to pay the expenses to support you. You will have to fend for yourselves." The simple one went and learned shoemaking, and the clever one, who had a sharp mind, did not desire to do mundane work like this. So he decided to go out into the world and look for something to do. He went and wandered through the market. There he saw a large carriage with 4 horses traveling along. He spoke up and said to the tradesmen, "Where are you from?" They answered that they were from Warsaw. "And where are you going?" They responded, "To Warsaw." He asked them, "Perhaps you need a helper?" They saw that he was intelligent and energetic, and he found favor with them, and they accepted him. So he traveled with them, serving them very well along the way. When they came to Warsaw, since he was intelligent, he considered to himself, "Being that I'm already in Warsaw, why should I be tied to these people? Maybe there's something better. I will go ask and see." So he went to the market and he began to investigate and ask about the people who had brought him, and if there were people better than them to work under. They answered that these people are upright. It is good to be with them. However, it is difficult to them. It's difficult to work with them because their dealings are done over great distances.
Okay, let's move on. We need to get through a little bit of the story to get to more of that. Go ahead.
He went and saw men from the clothing business who were passing through the market in their fashionable style. They donned various adornments, their hats, their sharp-pointed shoes, other refinements, and the way they walked and dressed. He had a sharp intellect, and this work appealed to him because it had grace and also was done in one's own home. He went and started to work under one businessman, and as And as is the way of hired servants, in the beginning, they need to work for a little pay and do difficult work. Then afterwards, they reach the level of established servants. His employer gave him hard work, and then he would send him to customers bearing merchandise as customary for servants. They need to hold their arms upraised, draping the garments along their arms' length for the customers to see. This work was very difficult for him to bear. Sometimes he would need to climb up many flights of stairs with his load. And the work was very hard for him. So he considered to himself, for he was a highly intelligent philosopher, why should I do work like this? Truly, the main point of working is to achieve the goal of getting married and supporting himself. They do not need to be concerned. I will have time to deal with it in the future, in the years to come. In the meantime, I am happy to wander the land in different countries to have my fill of the world. He went through the market and saw a large trading carriage passing by. He asked them, where are you going? To Ligorna. Would you take me there? Yes. So they took him there. And from there, he sailed to Italy, and from there to Spain.
So they think the Ligorna is actually a town in, maybe in Switzerland or around that border between Switzerland and Italy. But you know, I guess if you're living in Eastern Europe, it's kind of the fancy part of Europe. Yeah.
In the course of this, several years passed, and thus he became even wiser, for he had been in many countries. And then he thought to himself, now it would be good to think about the goal. He started to consider, with his philosophical analysis, what he should do. Found it fitting to learn to be a goldsmith. It is a major business, but attractive, demands wisdom, is also very profitable. Because of his high intelligence and philosophical ability, he did not need to learn several years. In only 1/4 of a year, he completed his study and became a very superior artisan. Afterwards, he speculated philosophically, even though I have 2 trades, who knows if both of them might fall out of demand, better than to learn a trade that will always be important. He concluded with his understanding of philosophy that he should learn to be a doctor, which is always needed and important. It is customary that before learning medicine, one must learn Latin, how to write, and the wisdoms of philosophy. And because of his understanding, he also learned this in a short amount of time, a quarter year. He became a
sped
great,
up medicine school.
yeah.
Medical school.
He became a great doctor and a philosopher learned in all the wisdoms. Afterwards, the world began to seem insignificant in his eyes, for because of his wisdom, being so skilled and professional, a wise man and a doctor, all the people in the world seemed insignificant to him. He began to think about fulfilling his goals and getting married. He thought to himself, if I marry here, who will know what became of me? I will go back to my family so they will see what I've become. I was only a young man, and now now I have come to such greatness. So he went and traveled to his family's house and suffered intensely along the way. But because of his wisdom, he had no one with whom to talk, and he could not find lodgings according to his taste. And so he had much suffering. Now, let us leave the story of the clever one for the time being. We will start to tell the story of the simple one.
Morris, would you mind continuing? Well, maybe we should stop here. Any thoughts? He's being provocative, a little bit, but anyway, go ahead.
I just wonder, it's a question like,
Yeah,
is Rebbe Nachman
yeah.
taking a dig at sort of normative Western Christendom, learning Latin and philosophy, and this seems to be a path to arrogance and overbearing and joylessness, and is that a?
I wouldn't say so simply. In terms of like the West, I would say that that's probably what felt really desirable, probably to a lot of people then, to go and be honored and learn all these great skills. This would be like the best thing you could do. And I'm not sure what I'm thinking as I'm reading this as well. Maimonides and Ibn Ezra, a lot of our Jewish sages have kind of gone through. This was the path for Jews to achieve greatness, right? Through first trades and then becoming a doctor or a philosopher and being honored by not just Jews but the greater society. So in some ways, this is like the what I was thinking. You're like, oh, Elon Musk, but
Well,
it's kind of like, yeah.
It seems that that might be a path, but
Yeah.
it's very stacked as it's very, not necessarily Christian, but very individualistic rather.
Very
than
individualist, that's true.
So,
Yeah, that's
He
true.
has choices all along that could be relational, I'm sure, but
That's true.
he's very, it's his ego and it's his individuality.
Yeah, it's. And he's really smart. He's thinking through all of them and he's on the face of it, it seems like good decisions on some level, right? You know, this is what would your career advisor tell you? So he's being very countercultural. I think he's being provocative on purpose, you know, to the audience. Let's keep on going. Unless Morris.
Because it was simple to learn.
I'm not sure if people can hear you. Can you speak a little bit louder? Do you mind?
Simple one learned the trade of shoemaking. Because he was simple, he learned it a long time until he was able to accept work. And even then, he was not fully expert. He married a woman, and he lived off his work. But because he was simple, he was not so talented in the work, and therefore his earnings were meager and limited. He did not even have time to eat because he had since he could not do the work skillfully. He had the habit of being happy all the time. He was filled with happiness always. He had all the kinds of food, all the drinks, all the clothing he wanted. He would say to his wife, "My wife, give me some meat." She would give him a piece of bread, and he would eat. After this, he would say, "Give me beans and sauce." She would cut him another slice of bread, and he would eat. And he would praise her. How fine and tasty his calves. And so he would command her to bring him meat and other fine foods. In place of each of them, gave him a slice of bread, he delighted very much from it. He would praise each food extravagantly, saying how well prepared and good it was. That he was unique after food. The truth, he really tasted in the bread, the taste of each food he wanted, because of his simplicity and great happiness. Otherwise, he would command, "My wife, give me a beer to drink." She would give him water. He would praise the quality of the beer. Give me honey. He gave him water, and he would praise it as before. Give me wine, and so on. Each time she would give him water, and he would enjoy and praise that beverage as if he were really drinking it. And so with clothing, he and his wife together shared one fur coat. He would say, "My wife, give me the fur coat." And when he needed to wear a fur coat, for example, to go to the market, she would give it to him. And when he needed to wear a suit to go in formal settings, he would say, "My wife, give me the suit." And she would give him the fur coat. And he would delight in it and praise it. How fine is the suit? When he needed a caftan, for example, to go to the synagogue, he would come in saying, "Wife, give me the caftan." And she would give him the fur coat, and he would praise it, saying, "How fine is this caftan?" When he would finish his shoe, it can be assumed it seemed it had three ends, or he had not mastered the craft. He would take the shoe in his hand and praise it highly. He would take great delight in it. He would say, "My wife, how beautiful and wonderful is this shoe. How sweet it is. The shoe is as sweet as honey and sugar." And she would ask him, "If so, why do all the other shoemakers charge 3 gold pieces for a pair of shoes? And you take only a piece and a half?" He answered, "But what does it matter to me? That is his affair, this is mine." And further, why must we talk about others? Why don't we make an estimate how much direct profit I make from this shoe? Now, I make a direct profit, 10 to go lean. Why should I complain with a profit like that? And he was only joyful and satisfied all the time. For the rest of the world, however, he was an object of ridicule. The people satisfied their craving to mock through him, and he found someone to deride according to their desire. For in their eyes, he appeared a madman. People would come to him and they would engage him in conversation with the intent of mocking him. Before speaking with him, he would stipulate, just without mocking him. Immediately, when they responded to him without mocking him, he would accept their words and begin talking with him. But he did not want to go any deeper into the matter, speculate about the intent. For that in itself would be a form of property.
This goes on forever.
It does, yeah. Go ahead.
When he saw that
Their intent.
their intent was to mock, he would say, if you were wiser than me, what would that make you? You would still be foolish, for who am I anyway? So if you were wiser than me, on the contrary, you would be thought of as a fool. And this was a description of the simple. Now let us return to our first subject.
Okay, let's stop for a second. What do we make of the shoemaker, the simple? It's like, he's a happy man, right? He's,
I'm not thinking about it in relation to last week's joy.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, Rebbe Nachman's really pushing it, right? He's like, he's eating the thing, the bread. He's like, this is the amazing sauce, and he's drinking the water and saying, this is great beer. But it's a really powerful image for you have spiritual joy and contentment in your life. That it overrides, I mean, we've all had the experience of being in the most beautiful place in the world, or one of the 10 places that everybody should visit. But if you're, I don't know, if you're having a hard time, or you're sick, or you're arguing with one of your family members, you can't even notice where you are. You can be in like the most mundane place, and if you're having a lovely time, who cares? It doesn't matter, right? You're enjoying that place as much as you want. And there are times in our lives when we feel like we have more resources and we're really suffering in this time of life where we have no resources and we feel free and amazing. And so it's like part of the part of what he's saying. And anybody else? Any thoughts about the and he's bringing in my mind this whole thing about the mockery, because right, he's saying that when if you're trying to live life just with spiritual joy and not worrying about this other thing that the other guy is spending so much time worrying about, then sometimes the world thinks, oh, you're not making fun of you, so to speak. And so he's so he's Rebbe Nachman is presenting it in stark terms, I think, to make his point really strongly about it all. And this whole thing of, and I mean, what I notice as well strongly is the idea of, which is so hard in our society and among all of us, the idea of career, right? He's really saying, saying from his point of view, and we should also say from where he's standing, we live in America for Jews is very different than Ukraine for Jews in terms of what is available to you and what most people could expect from their lives, so that I think that we should see that as part of whom he's talking to and how they can find their place in the world and happiness with their lot. And for us, maybe a little bit different. I'm not sure I would teach this to all of our religious school students and say, let's be happy with.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of very unhappy parents.
So we have a lot of unhappy parents. But this is a spiritual text, right? This is trying to get to how we think about our world and challenging us. Because what is it that most of us think? What is it that society teaches us? Every society, the most important is success in all these different ways. And this is what success looks like. And he's turning on his head and saying, well, what's really success? What is it that really gives you what you're looking for in life? So, and Barbara?
In the midst of this, a great commotion arose, that the clever one was on his way to visit here with great honor and wisdom. The simple one ran like the others to greet him with great joy, and he said to his wife, quick, give me the overcoat. I'm going to greet my beloved friend. She handed him the fur coat and ran to greet him. Now the clever one was traveling in a royal carriage in a high style. The simple one reached him and lovingly, joyously asked after his welfare. Brother, my dear friend, what are you doing here? Blessed is the one who brought you. He ran to me to see you. Now, the wise one, to whom the whole world was insignificant, it became all the more so with a man like this, who seemed like a lunatic. Yet in spite of this, because of the great love of their earlier years, he drew him close, and they traveled together through the city. The two householders mentioned at the beginning of our story, the fathers of these two sons, died while the clever one was wandering through the world, and left their houses behind. The simple one, who had remained in his hometown, had moved into his father's house and inherited it. But the clever one, who had been abroad, had no one to claim it on his behalf, and it became abandoned, and nothing was left of it at all. Therefore, the clever one did not have a place to stay upon his return to town. He lodged in one inn and suffered much there because the inn was not according to his desire. The simple one had found himself a new pastime. He would run back and forth from his house to the wise one in love and joy. He saw the suffering the clever one was enduring in the inn, and he said to him, "My brother, why don't you come and stay in my house? I will gather everything of mine into one corner, and the rest of the house will be free for you to use." This pleased the clever one, so he came to his house and stayed by him.
Sure.
Now the clever one was constantly filled with agony, for it became known that he was a magnificently intelligent man, a craftsman, and a great doctor. One nobleman came to him and asked him to make him a gold ring. He made the man a very wondrous ring and engraved on it illustrations with incredible workmanship. And he engraved an image of a tree that was very impressive. The nobleman came and was not at all pleased with the ring. He had much suffering from this, for he himself knew that if this ring with the tree would be seen in Spain, it would be very honored and important. At another time, a high-standing noble came to him with an expensive precious stone that came from far away, and he brought him another stone with an engraving. He asked the clever one to copy the image from the illustrated stone onto the other one. And he copied it exactly, barring one mistake that no one else would be able to discern aside from himself. The noble came to take the stone and was very pleased with it. The clever man suffered intensely from the mistake. My wisdom is so great, and yet I made a mistake such as this. Also from his work as a doctor, he suffered. When he came to a sick person, he gave him a treatment, and he knew with certainty that if the man would only survive, he would be healed entirely, because the treatment was an amazing one. Then afterwards, if the man died, everyone would say he was at fault. And he suffered intensely from this. And thus there were times when he treated a man and cured him, and everyone said, "It is just by chance." And he was constantly filled with suffering.
So, one more for the mind.
One time he needed a garment, so he called upon a tailor and toiled with him until he taught him to make the garment according to his desire, according to the style with which he was familiar. The tailor strived to make the garment according to his wishes and succeeded, with the exception of one lapel in which he had erred. And so he was constantly filled with agony.
What do you make of this whole cycle? So perfectionism, right? Because and the different kind of agony from worrying about this type of thing. It's very so I wanted to bring here that often what people say about the story is that we each have these two people within us, right? They're within all of us, and the question is, which one are we going towards? And so that there's the one who is the who's the clever and go ahead. Oh,
No, just exercise.
exercising your hands.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
And so in that sense, maybe he's not saying, "Oh, this is completely wrong." What he's saying is that this is now what brings you joy, right? That part of us is not the part of us that brings us joy. And in the end, and I think the question always for him is, which is the part that God wants? What does God want from us, right? Opposed to what does society want from us? What does that part of us want from us? What does the universe want from us through through all of it. Anybody else have any other comments before we continue on?
If I may, yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, since you said we wouldn't be getting to the last part where the parable of really of atheism comes in, I just wanted to say in the wise son, the wise man is presented in such a ridiculous way that it's striking to me that Rabbi Nachman, who spent much of the last part of his very short life talking to the maskilim, apparently to the people acquainted with the Western modern philosophy, and he spent a lot of his time with them. So I think he really, whatever he's doing here, it's not that he didn't find it deeply interesting to consider people who could reflect on their situation. That's really all I wanted to.
Beautiful, and I think it's true not only of him but of the other Hasidic masters too, right? Levi Yitzhak of Berdichev, when he moved to Berdichev was not a very religious city. It was kind of a city where there was a lot of Enlightenment thought and when he was there, when he first came, he was kind of an object of ridicule because he was so old-fashioned, but over the years he became known as a figure who you went to for advice and became more and more beloved in his town. So it was common. It wasn't like it was all these shtetls, but a lot of the Hasidic masters lived in places where there were maskilim and where there were a lot of, I guess, young people, I don't know, who are going towards other things, and that was part of the tension of their day.
But it's not, that was really interesting about what you said, is it's not just the direction you're going, it's the process of reflection. So the simple person doesn't have reflection, and it doesn't seem that that's a part of Judaism not to have reflection.
Mm-hmm. It is really interesting that to have that. I think let's keep going through the story, but I think it seems very purposeful that the wealthy one or the smart one has a lot of reflection, right? Everywhere there's a lot of reflection, and it seems purposeful that the simple one seems to have very little reflection, at least about his worldly circumstances, but even also about God and the universe, right? There's this kind of like, the other one is a philosopher and he's exploring, and the other one is not in that place. But we have to keep going. Now we're going to get to the part that starts to talk, get us to bringing in God into it. Anybody online want to read a little bit for us?
Where do we stop now?
Top of page 7, and the simple one.
The top one, yeah. And the simple one would run and come to him joyfully all the time. He always found him pained and full of suffering. He asked him, "Someone so wise and wealthy as you, why are you suffering all the time? You see, I am filled with joy all the time." However, he appeared in the eyes of the clever man as a joke and as the lunatic. And the simple one said to him, "You see, the average man who mocks me is a fool, for he is wiser than me, then to the contrary, he is a fool. So all the more so a clever man like you. What would you be if you were wiser than me?" Then the simple one said, "What would I not give for you to come to my level?" The clever one answered him, "That is possible that I will come to your level if I were to lose my intelligence. God forbid, or if I became sick, God forbid, and became insane. For what are you, a crazy man? But for you to come to my level, that is totally impossible, that you would become wise like me." The simple one answered him, "With the Holy One, blessed be he, anything is possible. It could happen that within a wink of an eye, I would come to your level." The clever one laughed at this a great deal. Now these two sons were known in the world as the clever one and the simple one. Even though there are many clever and simple men in the world, in this case it was especially recognized. Everyone was aware that they both came from the same place, and they had both learned together, and one of them had become awesome in intellect, and the other one was an extremely simple person. In the census book, in which were written all the names of the people of the nation, these two were identified as the clever one and the simple one. Came to pass that the king came upon the census book. He found there were the names of the two sons, one with the name Clever One and the other Simple One. And it was a wonder in his eyes that these two were identified by these names, and he had a craving to meet them. He thought to himself, if I send for them suddenly to come before me, they will be very frightened. The clever one will lose his clarity completely, and the simple one might possibly go crazy from fear. So he decided to send a clever messenger to the clever one, and a simple messenger to the simple one. The only problem was how to find a simpleton in the capital city. Most of the people in the capital are sophisticated, except for the treasurer, who is by intention a simpleton. They do not appoint a clever man as a treasurer, lest through his wisdom and intelligence he comes to waste away the treasury. Therefore, they specifically appoint a simpleton to be a treasurer.
Yeah. Go ahead, if you don't mind.
So the king called to a clever man and to a simpleton and sent them to the two sons of this story. And he gave to each messenger a letter. He should explain to them that the matter is not urgent and that the king is not commanding them to come. Rather, it is dependent on their own choice. If they want to come, they may, only that the king desires to see them. These two messengers set out and traveled to the governor, giving him the letter. They told him that the clever one is incredibly bright and very wealthy, and the simple one is exceedingly simple, and his whole wardrobe consists of one coat. The governor judged that it would not be fitting for the simple one to appear before the king in his old coat, so he provided him with appropriate clothes and placed them inside the royal carriage of the simple messenger. And he gave the messengers letters, and they set off for the town, the two sons. They gave them the letters, the clever messenger to the clever son, and the simple one to the simple.
So it's a little complicated, and I've tried to shorten I shortened that a little bit because it is. Anybody else? We just need to move forward.
Can I say something about that?
Sure.
I was gonna say, I don't know have anybody ever heard of the what's that prayer? It's called the Serenity Prayer, where the person is asking God to grant them the serenity to accept the things that they cannot change, and our courage to change the things that they can change, and then for wisdom to I know sorry, I keep on stuttering, to I know the difference between the
Beautiful. I think that's really
between the two things.
to describe what's happening here. I think I thank you for bringing that, Michelle. I really think there's all kinds of things going on, but one of them is about having wisdom is worrying about the things we need to worry about, giving the others to God and knowing the wisdom between the two. And that's a deep wisdom. I think that really applies here tremendously. I thank you for that insight. It's real nice. Would someone like to continue?
I would do it.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Where are we in the paragraph? As soon as the simple one
Yeah,
received?
that's the one.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. If I can't be heard, just let me know. Let me know.
Be heard fine.
You're good. You're great.
Okay, thank you. As soon as the simple one received his letter, he said to the messenger that brought it, I cannot read what is written there. Read it for me. The messenger said, I will tell you in brief what is written there, that the king wants you to come to him. The simple one said, just promise me that you're not joking. He answered, it's certainly the truth and not a joke. And he immediately became filled with joy and ran to his wife, saying, my wife, the king has sent for me. She asked on what account, but he did not have time to answer it all and hurried joyfully and traveled with the messenger. He entered and sat inside the carriage and found the new clothes and became more and more joyous. Meanwhile, news was passed on about the governor that he had behaved corruptly, so the king removed him from office. The king considered and decided that the governor ought to be a simple man who would govern the state with truth and uprightness, not knowing wisdoms and innovations. The king came to choose the simple son, and he sent a letter to the simple messenger that the simple son was to become governor. His route of travel passed through the governor's city, so the king posted
Go ahead.
city. As soon as he arrived, they were to detain him and crown him with the title of governor. So they did. They waited there, and as soon as he came, they detained him and informed him he had been made governor. He asked them, saying, "Just promise you're not joking." They answered that it was certainly not a joke, and he immediately became governor with authority and might. Now that his fortune had turned, and a change of fortune brings wisdom, so he gained more understanding. Even so, he did not use his wisdom at all, but rather ruled with simplicity as at first, and led the country simply, with truth and uprightness, and had not a trace of corruption. And to rule a nation, one does not need a high intelligence and cleverness, only simplicity and uprightness. When two would come before him with a case to be judged, he would say, "You are innocent and you are guilty," according to his true simplicity, without any cleverness or deception. And so he ruled all with the quality of truth.
One more paragraph, if you don't mind.
Thank you. The people loved him very much, and he had advisors who were true friends, and due to his love, one of them advised him, "Seeing that you will certainly have to come before the king, first because he sent for you, and second because it is customary for the governors to appear before him. Thus, even though you are very satisfactory and you have no corruption in your ruling of the state, even so it is the way of the king to speak in a sophisticated fashion and to speak in other languages. Thus it would be appropriate and well-mannered for you to be able to respond. So it would be good that I should teach you wisdoms and languages." The simple one found this agreeable, saying, "Why should I mind learning wisdoms and languages?" Immediately he thought of the words of his friend, the clever one, that it would be impossible for him to come to the clever one's level. And now he had already reached the other's wisdom. And even so, though he already knew much wisdom, he did not use it at all, but rather ruled everything with simplicity as at first.
Okay. Let's keep on going. So I want to get to the end of where we're going to probably stop, and then let's go back and talk about it. Anybody else after this? Anybody online after this? The king.
After this, the king sent for the simple one who is now governor, that he should come before him. So he traveled there. The king started off talking with him about the governing of the country, and the king was very pleased, for he saw that he was ruling with uprightness and great truth, without any corruption or deception. After this, the king began to speak about various disciplines of knowledge and languages, and the simple one answered him appropriately and found more and more favor in the king's eyes. The king said, "I see that he is such a brilliant man, and yet he rules with such simplicity," and was very pleased to the king. He appointed him to be a minister over all the ministers. He set aside a specific place where would be his chair of office. He commanded to be built beautiful and extravagant buildings to house his administration, and he gave him a letter testifying to his position that he should be as a minister as described. And so it was. They built him the buildings in the place where the king had commanded, and he went and accepted his honors and authority. Now the clever one, when he received the letter from the king, answered to the messenger abroad, "Wait and stay here the night, and we'll talk and consider together." In the evening he made him a festive meal. During the meal he drew on his wisdom and philosophy and said, "What is this, that a king such as this would send after me, after a lowly person as I? And who am I that the king would send me? Behold, he has such authority, such power, and I am lowly and foul in comparison to such a great and awesome king as this. How could it be explained that a king such as this would send after a lowly one such as I? If it is because of my wisdom, what am I compared to the king? And does he not have his own wise men? The king himself must be very wise otherwise, so how could it be that he's sending for me?" And he was very bewildered by this. And then he spoke up and said to the clever messenger, "Listen to what I say. In my opinion, it's certainly clear and can be proved that the king does not exist at all. The whole world is mistaken in this nonsense, believing that there is a king. Consider it. How could it be possible that all the people of the world would allow themselves to depend on one man who is the king? Certainly there is no king at all." Continuing or no?
Please continue, yeah.
The clever messenger responded, but wait, I brought you the letter from the king. The clever one asked him, did you receive the letter from the king directly? He asked. He answered, no, someone gave me the letter in the name of the king. So he said to the messenger, there, you see with your own eyes that my words are correct. There's no king at all. Then he asked him further, tell me, are you from the capital city and lived there all your life? Have you ever seen the king? He answered, no. For in truth, not everyone merits to see the king, for the king only appears in public very rarely. Clever one said to him, you see that my words are clear and accurate. It is certain there is no king at all, for even you have never seen the king in your whole life. The clever messenger continued and asked, if this is true, then who runs the country? Clever one answered him, I'll give you the explanation. You asked the right person, for I'm an expert in this, because I wandered through various countries and it was in Italy. The custom is that there are 70 advisory positions, and these offices are held for a limited time. All the citizens of the country have a turn as an advisor, one after the other. His words began to make an impression on the messenger until he agreed, and they decreed that there is no king in the world after all. Then the clever one said, wait until morning and I'll show you one proof and after another that there's no king in the world at all. The clever one rose in the morning and woke up his friend and clever messenger and said, come outside with me, and I will show you with total clarity how the world is totally mistaken. And in truth, there is no king, and they are all deeply mistaken. They went to the market and saw a soldier there. They grabbed him and asked, for whom do you work? King, he answered. They asked, have you ever seen the king in your life? No. You see what nonsense that is, said the clever one. Again, they approached another soldier and began speaking with him. For whom do you work? They asked. The king. Have you seen the king? No. So you see with your own eyes, the matter is clear. They're all mistaken. Then the clever ones, oh, go ahead.
Let's do one last paragraph and then we'll stop, I think.
Then the clever one said, come with me and travel through the world and I'll show you further how the whole world is seriously misled. So they went and traveled through the world, and every place they went, they found that the people were mistaken. The matter of the king became for them like a fairy tale. And in every place where they found the world in error, they compared the king to a fairy tale character. If one were to believe that the king really does exist, he ought to believe in fairy tales as well. So they went and traveled until their money ran out. And they first sold one of their horses, and then the second, then they sold all of them, and they were obliged to go on foot, and they were constantly investigating people and found that all of them were in error. They turned into beggars walking on foot, and their prestige faded, and they were not respected at all, for people did not pay attention to such pathetic characters. More?
Yeah, was that?
I said the clever one was too smart.
Too smart for his own good, right?
For his downfall.
Well, there's so much going on here, right? And if you can kind of see where the story is going, it gets a little bit more complicated. We just don't have time to read through all of it. It does pull it together well, but I think we get the gist of it just from reading this. And so obviously the king is corresponds to both the earthly ruler, but also God is the king. And so in the end, right, God is the one, right? God is the one who helps decide when you have the wisdom or don't have the wisdom, when your life takes you to a good place or doesn't take you to a good place. That we walk through the best way to walk through the world. The way he's saying is with this holy, what the Hasidim would call holy simplicity. And that's, doesn't mean you don't strive for anything. And I think maybe we a little bit different, but the sense of be content with your lot and do your best. But there's also this whole other piece, which Phil was talking about, which was about the philosophic pursuit and the pursuit of trying to reach understanding and truth through reason as opposed to through just experience, which was really important to the Hasidim. One of the, again, in this class, I keep bringing all kinds of different images, but this is from an Eastern source that came to mind, where, when you go to a mango orchard, you don't walk around the orchard and just say, oh, I count every single mango here and how beautiful they look. You pick a mango and you eat it. And that's, so the simpleton is someone who is eating the mango And the philosopher is someone who's just going around and counting the mangoes and trying to see how beautiful each one is and doing that. But in the end, the mangoes are growing rotten on the tree while he's doing so. It's kind of, I get from the last message there, right? That he's rationalizing reason and philosophize out of a good intention in some ways, right? Himself out of actually meeting the king, right? He could have met the king. He had a direct message from the king, but he didn't recognize the message, right? It's so beautiful, right? Where you get a message from the king, and who's worthy, who's unworthy. It doesn't. We think we know who's unworthy and who's worthy, but we don't, right? Both the simple one and the wise one. But the wise man got the message, but he was so wise and astute and this that he completely misunderstood and convinced himself it didn't come from the sovereign, and then started to convince other people that it wasn't, and then lost all these years doing all these things instead of he could have been in the palace doing something great. While the other one was incredulous because he got a message from the king, but kind of just went with it and went and somehow, I'm not quite sure what to make with the whole thing. If you don't need to be, you can rule with simplicity. I mean, I think on some level there is a truth to it that there not simplicity. There's a way of managing and being in a world where it can be incredibly successful and
What if
managed.
it's humility instead of
Humility.
simplicity?
Yeah.
I mean, that seems to me that's more messages.
I think the simplicity is a mixture of humility and of not.
Can I
Exactly.
say one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead, Michelle. Yeah.
I was gonna say, is it possible that the wise man knew it was a letter from the king, but he was upset that he didn't get it and he sabotaged the other guy?
Say that again. He was upset he didn't.
I said, is it possible that the wise man knew that it was a real letter from the king, but
Yeah.
he convinced the simple guy that it wasn't because he was upset that he didn't get the letter because he thought that he deserved it and not the other guy?
Well, they both got it. But yeah, I think in general that it's all the doubts and the thinking and things that get the wise man in trouble. And I do remember, just one more point on the governance part. I do remember reading about some figure who was a teacher, but also was in charge of some government office with 1,000 people, and wasn't the most sophisticated person, but just made good decisions and knew how to treat people well, and just kind of had a kind of common sense simplicity, and then just did a great job at ruling, and just kind of really brought a directness to what they were doing. So then, yeah, go ahead.
See a psychological thing here, not just reason versus spirit. So if you look at like on page 10, where he goes on and he's saying, who am I? The king is so much wise. King must be wise. How can it be that he's second for me?
Yeah,
It's got humility.
yeah,
All he needs to do is say, but I'll go anyways.
yes, exactly.
So that's a psychological thing. It's not necessarily, and so instead he shifts to what's more comfortable.
Or is
But it
it,
doesn't mean he's total.
or is it fake humility? Is it kind of like a very court-like, where it's hard? Yeah, maybe it is sincere.
It's just too uncomfortable to feel like that.
Where he just can't. He's complicated his life enough with all these questions about philosophy and this and the world that he's not direct, right? There's the directness of holy simplicity, which is I got a message from King, I'm going to respond to it. I feel something. God is here, and I'm going to try and engage with God. In other words, well, what does it mean, and why did it come at this moment, and where is this, and how is, and they're building a whole thing, and one could get lost for years, and analyzing it and thinking about it and going and the simple guy during all this time is just enjoying, and he's been made by the king into some great, minister, and maybe it's both worldly but also spiritual. He's enjoying a lot of spiritual fruits because he's just going straight to what the message is coming to him. Go ahead, Bill.
If there's time for just a moment, I see that Rabbi Nachman is really not interested in the world of, from this story, in the world of politics. That is, he seems to feel that that simplicity plus having sufficient information is all you need to rule, and doesn't have the idea that the wise ruler has to question motives and things like that, has to be critical of the way people are in the world. Otherwise, he will be taken advantage of. And so the simple man becomes the perfect minister precisely because of his simplicity. And there's another side to that too. And maybe he does understand that, but he doesn't bring it out in this parable or this story.
It's true. It's an interesting question of does he or not see people's motives. I mean, there's a moment early on in the story where people mock him, and it's not like he's totally oblivious to their mocking. He sees and he knows they're mocking him, and he says, stop mocking me, right? So it's not like he's completely unaware of people's motives, but he himself kind of goes around it. So I have a similar question to you about it, is that, to be a king, one has to be astute about people, but does it come to him naturally from being in this place of simplicity that he just sees people's motives and sees where people really are coming from, and is himself choosing not to play what I call the macher game, and not getting caught up in the kind of but it does seem a little bit fantasy-like. I agree on some level to think that one could be successful in political way in this way.
But we see it at all in Eastern European Poland, where the Jews have no power, so he's
Yeah.
not really dealing with power. But
That's
he
true.
thinks it's-
That's true. Yeah, the Jews were powerless at this time. It would be different if he was, modern day Israel and a different kind of. But he's not looking at it from that place. But I think he is saying, maybe he's saying that even if you're simple, if you're with the king or the queen, if God is giving you spirit, that you could rule and be recognized for your ruling power, even at that moment, even with that.
You can complicate things and come to the wrong conclusion. You feel that you know more than so the other side of humility is conceit that you'll know better.
Exactly. Yeah, and you say don't get lost in all that other stuff. It's an endless hole, and we easily get lost in it. The sophistication and political sophistication, and intellectual sophistication, philosophic, and sometimes just a simple being direct gets you what you're looking for. And not only does it can make you successful, but it brings you the most joy. And you're in this world for a short time. And I think there's a sense of the other guy who thinks he's filling his life with so much richness is actually, in the end, losing his time and being able to be with the sovereign of sovereigns, and so what I take from this story is that there's a place where, with holy simplicity, we can experience the divine and experience bliss and experience joy and just be present with our lives. He's just present with his life in this kind of transcendent, blissful way, right? The bread is everything. Everything is for him, and he's having a great life. And even he has this moment where suddenly his life is completely turned around from utter poverty to being wealthy, but his life doesn't really change that much internally. He's kind of just going through all of it and just being blissful. And the other guy is going through so much agony from all of his, and that we have both those parts within us. And if we try and live with the holy simplicity, it will allow us to be more present with the ups and downs of our lives, which we really can't always control and happen out of nowhere. And that can bring us the richness and the feeling of connection that in the peacefulness, right? He's very the simple man has such a peacefulness to the way his life is described, and the other man has such an agony to the way his life. And which voice within us do we try and follow? And
Sameach bechelko.
Sure.
Is that the Mishnah version? Sameach bechelko, is that it? Rejoice. The one who's rich is the one who.
Yeah, Sameach bechelko. Yeah.
In his own.
Yeah.
Well, and that whole what's that whole Mishnah is, who is mighty? Is it who Gibor? The one who who conquers his Yetzer Hara, right? His not so good inclination, Koveshet Yitzro, and it says, who is happy? Who's Sameach Becholko, or Ezehu Ashir, who is wealthy, the one who is content in his lot.
Yeah.
And then it's who is Chacham, who is wise, the one who learns from all human beings, right? The Melamed Yikol Ben Adam. And so yeah, this is like the core wisdom of our tradition in some ways, but just also brought with the spiritual element, which is that it gives you transcendent joy to live from that place. The holy simplicity of it brings joy to us and our family members too through all of it. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for bearing with your long story, which was originally 17 pages. I did whittle it down to 14 and we read about 10, but read the rest if you'd like. And see you next week.
Thank you very much.
Isaac B.
Thank you
Isaac
all.
B. Singer would like this story.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.